Hey everyone, PapaSmithy here, President and CGO of FlyQuest. Today I'm joined by the lovely Nick Phan, our League of Legends GM, and there's one clear topic to talk about. Of course, today I want to talk about the 2023 LCS program here at FlyQuest, and I think we should start where the fans are, because the constant refrain this offseason, Nick, people were talking about and linking FlyQuest with basically every free agent on the market. And we don't need to get into specifics, but was that an exaggeration? What can you tell us about where this process for FlyQuest began?
No, it's true. I mean, our offseason started pretty early. I think once we were eliminated in playoffs, we got to work really fast. I think we had an idea that our roster needed to be explosive. We wanted our roster to play philosophically through mid-jungle. And so as soon as September rolled around, we hit the ground running. And when people consider, where FlyQuest was in the offseason, we knocked on every door. LCK, LPL, LEC, minor regions, everything. We knocked on every door. We scouted so many different players. We interviewed tons of different talent. And I'm pretty excited with what we can share and update as far as our thought process is going into everything.
So I jumped into the FlyQuest offseason about halfway through, and at that point, some of the names had filtered through, some of the focuses were clear. You already touched on it a bit, this focus on mid-jungle. Obviously people understand mid's the center of the map, the jungle is important. Why mid-jungle as a duo as that main focus?
Honestly, I think we were tired of seeing the game played at a stalled pace. I think we really wanted it, like I said, to be a pretty explosive team dynamic. We wanted the pace of the game to increase. We wanted just to be able to take all of the options that we can take in the game and just execute in the best way that we saw possible. Ultimately, I think mid-jungle has the ability to influence both of your sides.
Yep.
And as long as you have multiple options that a jungle and mid laner can play through, you're going to be able to do whatever you want on the map.
Got it. So we're down on the NARAMs, up on playing a fast pace. That's what we like to hear. Okay. So far you're selling me. I'm the fan here, the fan conduit, feeling good about it. Now, interestingly, it felt like the offseason started with support though, because the first name, if I think back chronologically, it sounded like was pretty firm on the roster was Eyla. What can you tell the fans about Aphromoo exiting and Eyla coming on?
Yeah, I mean, you guys have seen our roster. There's changes everywhere. At least with Aphromoo, he's one of my favorite players that I've worked with. He brings so much to the team play. He's able to dictate and direct everybody, not just in game, but in review. And he really accelerated the growth of all of our members. But with the focus on how our roster was constructed in 2022, Aphro was kind of the binding piece for all of our young guys. As we went through our iterations, and we had hundreds of them throughout this offseason, we realized with the direction that we started to really, hone in and focus in on, Aphro's best skill sets wouldn't shine the way it would in our previous roster. Lo and behold, Eyla, 2 years of fantastic dominance in Academy, really strong skill set mechanically. We just felt like with the pieces that we were targeting, it made sense to pivot to Eyla, and that is kind of how we settled on the name.
Okay, Eyla comes in, skilled player, someone who in Academy, like you mentioned, was probably the best performing player over the course of 2 years. Mm-hmm. But let's come back to mid-jungle, because the name definitely that I saw on the first list, because when you join, you're like, okay, where are we at? What are we looking at in the off season? There were some names there that I was like, really, this guy, like, really, we're talking to him. And that name to me was VicLA. It jumped off the page. This guy was super hyped part of KT Rolster's rise towards the end of summer. Mm-hmm. And yet, here he was, sounded like FlyQuest's main target.
Yeah, I think when you look at a lot of Korean talent in general, it's very rare to see players come kind of even before they hit their prime. I think we're gonna see a huge domination of VicLA in the LCS, hopefully for years to come. But you don't often get talent like this coming overseas. A lot of times once they become that recognized gem in the LCK, they stay there for years and years and years. And so, to your surprise, just as much as mine, we did it. We were able to at least build a roster where we found this kid, obviously through scouting and watching as much as we could, and believed in him to the point where he was just our number one option.
This guy just turned 19, he was 18 when he was speaking to him, played, I guess, altogether about one split of the LCK. You guys might remember from Worlds the year before. Really, really mechanically talented.
Incredibly flexible play style. He's got a huge positive reputation in the LCK. It's just going to be crazy to have him.
So okay, we're sitting there with mid laner, support. Let's come back to the mid jungle. At this point, pivoting with one import to multiple different options, a lot of different ways the roster could go. Spica was a name that was on the lips of a lot of different teams. A well-known player, one that you know and love, the zoomer of the team. He's going to definitely bring in the zoomer energy. Talk to me about Spica, because he's a big character. He obviously had a MVP split a couple of years ago. Didn't come together this year on TSM, but you said mid-jungle, Spica VicLA. What's going on there?
I mean, I think with Spica specifically, I think a lot of people have seen a couple years of rockiness with TSM and they forget just how dominant Spica was when he, unfortunately for us at FlyQuest in 2020, kind of ripped the championship trophy away from us, right? So when I look back then, I at least have pretty fond memories of just how strong of a player he was, how flexible his
rookie split,
in his rookie split, yeah. And so when we look at what he can be, and we look at even just, people don't know this, but during scrims and playoffs, he was probably one of the most dominant players. I think every team can talk about and speak to just how impressive his performances were in light of just how inconsistent everything was at TSM. He might be the bright spot that I think people have looked over for a couple of years. And I think with our roster, just the fluidity of, we'll talk about impact a little bit as well, but just the fluidity of kind of our veteran voices and some of these young, really high octane players, I think Spica is going to fit in really well.
So definitely something we have to hold ourselves to is this mid-jungle focus. The language barrier is going to be there initially. VicLA already taking English lessons, of course. We were actually in a group Korean lesson yesterday, so we're trying to meet halfway on the culture barriers there. But the explosiveness of the two, when it comes together, is going to be exciting to see. And we've talked about zoomer energy, explosiveness. You already said the name. You need a rock on the top when that happens.
You need impact. I mean, Impact was one of the guys that we focused on for years. Behind the scenes, he's one of the most hardworking players. He is someone who will challenge natural convention in the way that you run things in a team system. He's going to challenge the players. He's going to be able to push the button. He's kind of our captain piece.
Locker room leader.
Yeah. And I think like that, along with all the just historic signs of dominance, the pedigree speaks for itself. So we're really excited to have him on board.
When you have a resident top laner, fluent in English and Korean, already a young Korean mid laner who's going to look to him as a locker room leader, but also in the short term, right, to facilitate some of the discussion in game, the value of this guy is going to be insane to our program next year. So 4 out of 5 players for our LCS 2023 spring roster locked. 80 carriers, the outstanding remaining name. And we go back to the depth charts. We have an import spot open. We scour the world, we scour the globe. We go back to that list, and there was a name that honestly, almost the first thing I did at FlyQuest was like, no. Like this guy's not coming to North America. Did you watch LCK Summer? And that name to any viewer is Prince. This guy was 1v9 like few players have ever been in a regular season especially. He was popping off. And so the moment that I saw that name, I was a GM. You don't get Prince to North America. It doesn't happen. So Nick, like, how'd you do it? Like, what are we talking about here?
I mean, honestly, I think when you look at just like how we diagrammed everything when you first came in, I mean, we looked at VicLA and Prince, and together it's like,
they were on the original.
Not only is that not going to happen together.
They were on the original super roster, right? That's the one where you're like, hey, proof of concept, like these names are pretty good, right?
Yeah. It's like, not only are these two players not going to come together, how do you think we're going to get them one by one or individually?
I don't know, Nick. That's your job to explain.
And the way that it shook out was actually really funny. I think we were finalizing all of our pieces at that point. You know, we were basically finalized with Spica. And I get a message from Prince, and he goes, "You have VicLA? Sign me up." And it was a pretty quick turnaround. I think from that point on, you know, we had actually approached him very, very early on in the off season. He was my target player. I just thought he would fit so well in North America. You guys are gonna love his charisma, love his personality, and obviously love his gameplay. But, you know, the Korean markets move later, the Chinese market moved later. So by the time we got to right around free agency day, I get this message from him, and it moves very fast.
You have to do something right now.
Yeah.
Print that message, frame it, It's gonna look good. He already does the whole framing thing anyway. I can't even line it up. That's right.
It's the Prince.
He's got it over there.
Yeah.
To me, when I zoom out, even from an unbiased perspective, let's call myself unbiased PapaSmithy for a moment. You look at the roster, Rock on the top. We know Impact can use resources, perfectly confident without them. The mid jungle is all about moving. The AD carry that demands the resources is what this roster conventionally wants. I saw Dove last season. I think Impact's going to want to have a bit more food than Dove could have on the Sandbox team. But, But if you want someone who calls resources and carries, that's Prince to a T. So our LCS roster for 2023, the moment that part came in, that's when, you know what, I puffed my chest out a bit. I sat up a bit more straight because you've done a good job over there.
Yeah, I mean, I think us and the team, we spent so much time putting together this roster, so much time researching what it would take for this roster to come together. I'm thrilled that we had a chance to put it together and make some magic next year.
Whenever you're changing 5 players, the roster can fall into many buckets. You can have a developing roster, you can have a mid-tier roster. The championship roster was what was written on that first slide. The championship roster is what came out. So very, very excited for you guys and even myself to see this team in action in 2023. So going back in time a little bit, we should talk about the coaching staff, because while we had those multi-region deep dive for our roster, the clearest thing pretty much was that we wanted to retain our LCS coaching staff in terms of Sharkz and Richard, who both were a big part of FlyQuest's success in 2022. Now, as the roster developed, we had to think, okay, pretty big Korean imprint on the team coming in for 2023. In the short term, 2 players are still learning the language. Definitely the thought of, is there the right person to add to this staff, to add a little bit of pizzazz, add a bit of value, came up. Where it ended, I don't think anyone expected.
I don't think I expected it. I think after the dominance that DRX had at Worlds and just their Cinderella story, I didn't think I would be sitting at the table with Ssong talking about, let's come back to NA and let's reassert ourselves. I think if people remember back even to 2017, Ssong and I actually worked together to go to Worlds.
5 years ago.
5 years ago. But we narrowly missed that title, went to Worlds, and I think we bowed out of groups, even though I think we had a very strong chance of making it out that year. And I think Ssong, a couple years after that, his tenure in NA isn't something a lot of people would celebrate. But I think with the recognition that he's been able to earn from his time at DRX and his time in Korea, notably this year, I think he's ready to make a comeback, and we're ready to.
Speak about hiring someone at their career peak, the World Championship head coach. And when it comes to the DRX story, the defining story of 2022 League of Legends by a lot, I think back to Game 5 of that final, of Ssong really puppet mastering the draft and pulling off a draft that T1 couldn't have anticipated, surprising them, and ultimately delivering the most memorable World Championship win of all time. So him being available, him being interested in coming to FlyQuest, a bit like Prince, I'm sure, seeing the names that we have here and feeling like it's a project that can follow up a World Championship success. We're getting someone in his prime for sure, and we're getting someone who's going to be a cultural bridge also. That was the bigger need, was, hey, how are we going to integrate these new players and 5 players who hadn't played together? When it comes to an interesting band of people coming together and achieving something, Ssong's got a pretty good recent history.
He's got a great one. Yeah, I think we got a squad. I'm excited, man, because I think what he's brought to DRX in this past year, I think he's going to show in spades when he gets here.
So Ssong head coach, that part simple to understand for the LCS team. Of course, Richard will continue as an assistant coach. Let's expand a bit about Sharkz' new role, because he's still someone that's integral to the program. He's actually taking on a new title, kind of inspired by Peter Dunn over at EG.
Yeah, Alex is going to be shifting, Alex or Sharkz is going to be shifting over to the head of coaching role. He just has such a versatile skill set. He's great at working and mentoring coaches. He's great at leveling and building player relations. I think he's a sound strategic mind. I think it's going to be great for our program. He's going to be able to influence the direction and systems of the LCS team along with Ssong. I think he's going to be able to influence and mentor the guys in our academy program. And I think he's going to be able to make an imprint on our amateur program as well. So at all 3 levels, our goal is to make sure our systems are cohesive, The way that we approach preparation and the way that we approach performance is all consistent, and I think Alex is going to be a great part of that.
So to reiterate, we'll go through our LCS starting roster. We will have Impact in the top lane, Spica in jungle, VicLA, our new mid laner, Prince, the AD carry, Eyla support. And in terms of the coaching staff, we do have the current reigning world champion head coach in Ssong, Richard along by his side as assistant coach, and Sharkz overarching the entire League of Legends program, like you say, the 3 tiers of League of Legends here at FlyQuest, as our head of coaching. And so that pretty much wraps our LCS discussion here for FlyQuest in 2022. Not the end of things for the actual team. In fact, when you're watching this, I believe you'll already be over in South Korea.
I'll already be in South Korea, man.
The boot camp begins very shortly. We're trying to get in shape for January. We need to look good for you guys when it comes to the LCS. So join us in January. We'll get some content out there. You guys will see us on the Rift in the LCS. And yeah, championship roster is what we're calling it. That's how we're going to define ourselves. So
Yes, sir.
a lot to look forward to in 2023.
Happy holidays.